Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Mitt, and on this channel I talk about stocks, investing, and finance, and we do a keen focus on Palantir, not only because I've invested a lot into Palantir, but also because this company is so complex that there's a lot of different things to dissect. Today is another installment of our series on the SPACs that Palantir has invested in. SPACs are special purpose acquisition companies that don't traditionally go public through an initial public offering, but rather merge with an amount of money that's already been raised by a lot of investors who are also raising that money for them, and then that company goes public on the NASDAQ stock exchange. Today, we are talking about the SPAC called Cellularity, which is a biotech company. And oh boy, do I have a lot of thoughts on biotech companies. This piece of information is going to allow me to express my thoughts more on biotechnology and sort of the risks associated with it. And we're going to talk about why Palantir invested in this company. What's the point of this company in general? What does this company do? Because biotech companies are a little bit harder to understand in terms of what their pipeline is, what their drug discovery mechanism is. And then we're going to talk about the impact on Palantir as a company if this company were to explode or, become very big. So the key takeaway here, and the reason, again, why we do these analyses is to really understand, okay, Palantir is going a different strategy than a lot of other companies. They are not creating a venture capital part of their business where they're investing in other companies through that by raising their own money. They are investing in unproven companies. And when I mean unproven, I don't mean like dinky little startups, but I mean companies that, they're not multi-$100 billion companies. They're going public, but just because you're a public company doesn't mean you're proven. It means you have something to offer to the public, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be successful. Palantir, we don't know if it's necessarily going to be successful, right? They just gone public only a year ago. So these are very risky bets, and the goal of these videos is to analyze how they have mitigated the risk and the long-term potential of data analysis, which is the core of Palantir's offering to a lot of these SPACs. It's the reason they choose to work with these SPACs, and what the potential is of the SPAC of the certain company that's Palantir's invested in to actually become a really big company. So that's what we're going to talk about. Now, we're going to do a couple things in the video. Number one, we're going to analyze why this was invested. I already did that. So let's do it again. Okay, so let's talk about what Cellularity is and how it's going to use the Palantir Foundry. Okay, so let's talk about what Cellularity is and ultimately how it's going to use Palantir. So Cellularity will use Palantir Foundry, this is from their press release, a platform that leverages artificial intelligence and AI and allows for the integration of siloed data. Cellularity will employ Palantir's platform to secure deeper insights into data obtained from Cellularity's discovery and process development, as well as manufacturing and biorepository I messed that word up so bad. Operations. Shyam Sankar, our boy, Chief Operating Officer of Palantir, said, Cellularity's unique approach to cellular therapy is grounded in their highly proprietary placental cellular technologies, which is what we're going to talk about in a second, has the potential to transform the field, and it's ideally suited to synergize with our data analytics capabilities. So that's the first reason why this investment was made possible. Cellularity is a company that heavily relies on data-driven decision-making. Palantir, obviously, that's their core value proposition. So the intersection of those two is why this seems to be synergistic. Leveraging Cellularity's significant pool of valuable data, we will be able to generate meaningful clinical insights capable of advancing the current treatment landscapes. Our software allows organizations to accelerate life science research. I did an entire video on how Palantir helps life science companies, and enables data-driven inference to guide scientific research, i.e. the R&D, research and development drug discovery process. Great AI is only possible with the best data sets, and we are excited to partner with Cellularity to unlock the potential of health data and redefine the cell therapy landscape. So, pretty big, interesting idea, right? They see a lot of potential in Cellularity as a biotech startup because they're using data, and now they're investing with them and seeing what the partnership looks like. So, having said that, let's actually talk about what Cellularity is in the first place. Now, so their website is a little bit complicated. It's not necessarily easy to understand what Cellularity actually is. It took an hour or two of some research for me to really understand what this company does, because the problem with biotech companies is sometimes they don't explain in clear words what they are. Now, you could say that I don't understand those clear words, that's fine, but as a general retail investor, I should be able to understand you from your company, right? So it's a little bit harder to understand. Cellularity says they're a next-generation biotech company creating off-the-shelf cellular medicines for cancer, infectious diseases, and degenerative diseases. So they're attacking immunology, oncology, which is the basis for cancer primarily, and degenerative diseases. This is like stuff that makes your muscles go worse over time, which degenerates, which leads to a lot of health effects, and infectious diseases. Creating off-the-shelf cellular medicine is a little bit interesting to me. This is theoretically do you buy it off the shelf, right? Are they making drugs that are just like pills that you can take, in some respects? So that part really got my eye, because I was like, most of these things, they're administered by a hospital, right? You can't just buy them off the shelf. Now, obviously, they're far away from it just being on the shelf and anyone can buy it. But if that's the potential of this company, that's pretty interesting if you could just buy an off-the-shelf cellular medicine. Now, Their goal is to turn living cells into medicines. That is the goal of this company. At Cellularity, they aim to advance human health, quality of life, longevity through the power of allogenic placental-derived cells. And that is the core thesis of their business model and that, or their technology, science. And we're going to talk about what that means. They raised over $350 million. They were founded in 2016, so about 5 years old, and they've completed about 15 trials. Now, what is the power of the placenta? So first of all, it's important to understand what is a postmortem placenta, because or postpartum placenta, because that's ultimately what they use. So they use postpartum placental-derived cells. Postpartum, there's a lot of P's in this, I'm sorry, is when after a woman has given birth. The placenta is an organ that develops in your uterus during pregnancy for a woman. This structure provides oxygen and nutrients to your growing baby and removes waste products from your baby's blood. So it's a very vital organ that helps the baby grow over those 9 months and have a healthy delivery. The placenta attaches to the wall of your uterus and your baby's umbilical cord arises from it. What this company does is they take the cells from the placenta after postpartum, after birth, and they use those cells to be the fundamental scientific breakthrough to build their drugs. So they say, one of the biggest challenges cell therapy developers face is the human immune system. How do you make a cell-based treatment that the patient's immune system does not reject as foreign? What this means is when you're creating a therapy for a human who is in a disease, right? Let's say they have cancer. The immune system of the human's body has to accept the thing that is being put in order to fight off the disease. If it feels that the thing that's being injected inside of it, the therapy, and in this case, it would be cell-based therapy, right? This company would be pumping cells into your body if you have a disease to try to fight it off. If it feels like those cells are foreign, then it's not going to accept it. And if it's not going to accept it, the treatment's not going to work. Currently, approved treatments overcome this challenge by using the patient's own cells. That's what is currently happening in the landscape. And this approach is extremely expensive and difficult to scale. So that is the market opportunity here. That if you're using your patient's own cells, like let's say there's healthy cells in your arm, but your leg is messed up because it has a degenerative disease. Can we take the healthy cells from your arm and transfer it to your leg? Right now, that's expensive and that's difficult to scale. What they are doing is they're taking women that have had placentas after their birth and they're taking cells from that, doing clinical research, deep research and development, right? This is why they raised $350 million, because you need a lot of money to do this stuff. You got to convince a lot of people that this is a good idea. You got to run a lot of trials and experiments, as any biotech company has to do. And then they were trying to use the cells that they get from that placenta and then put it into therapies that ultimately develop as effective mechanisms to treat certain diseases that exist. And that's sort of what they're doing. They have proprietary technology, which is important to understand, that converts a plentiful and normally discarded source material into potential therapeutics. So these placentas would go away unless there would be companies that take those placentas and take something meaningful from those placentas. Otherwise, they would go in the garbage. With a single placenta capable of yielding 100 to 100,000 doses, depending on the therapeutic. So this is why they're very excited for the placenta-based cellular technology, because they see it as an untapped market opportunity, and they ultimately see it as a breakthrough from a drug discovery perspective. If one placenta could yield hundreds of thousands of doses, which, okay, this makes sense now. See, I'm learning it on the spot. It justifies the off-the-shelf marketing of the product, right? Because you're talking about 100,000 doses. This is something that they literally could scale, and economies of scale mean costs would go lower, which means there actually is a potential market that would just buy this off the shelf, or they could easily distribute it to hospitals at that point, which would be important. They say that their technology makes it possible to develop cell therapies that are scalable and cost-effective, and that can accelerate preclinical development to as little as 18 to 24 months. So that's sort of the basis about this company. There's obviously a lot more you can go into, understand their pipeline, their drugs, all that stuff, but that's sort of what you have to get at if you're trying to understand why Palantir invested in this company. Now, let's look at the CEO's quote, Robert J. Hari, who has an MD, a PhD, and he is the CEO of Cellularity. Cellular medicine represents the next frontier in the treatment of cancer and many other serious diseases, but despite important advancements such as CRT, the field remains in its infancy, and many opportunities to exist and innovate improve the quality, precision, and economics of these cellular medicines. One cannot overlook the enormous value resident in the deep analysis of the large and complex data sets related to the genomics, synchronomics, epigenetics, and biological performance of cells in manufacturing and clinically. As pioneers in placental-derived stem cell therapies and having 2 decades of experience in the procurement of postpartum placentas from over 50,000 newborn donors, we've amassed a vast repository of data that could hold valuable insights and guide the development of future programs when coupled with deep learning and a leading AI innovator such as Palantir. Moreover, parallel progress in annotating the genome and applying that intelligence to screening donors and having the ability to predict a range of biological characteristics will ultimately guide both the manufacturing and clinical application of these products. Last sentence, then we're going to break this down. This partnership provides the foundation for translating our data into inferences that can guide our research and development programs and can help us realize our combined goal of creating the next evolution in cellular medicine. Okay, that's a mouthful, but I really wanted to read that quote because I think it kind of explains the thesis of why I'm excited about this. I'm cautious. I'm going to explain why I'm cautious, but first let me at least explain why I'm excited. Good news, bad news type of thing. They have 50,000 newborn donors and a vast amounts of probably thousands of millions of sets of data from the placentas they've achieved from those newborn donors. AI and innovation, AI and machine learning innovation models that Palantir offers through the Foundry software is trying, at least in this partnership, to optimize all of that data that exists. For a drug discovery company, and again, I did a whole video on it, I'll leave it in the description from a macro level that explains this more. When you're trying to discover drugs, you need a lot of data to understand inferences that give valuable insights. It's almost like you're trying to find something new in the world, right? If you're trying to come up with an idea, you have to be very creative to come up with an original idea, right? If you're trying to start a startup, you have to be like, all right, what's the problem in the world? How can I solve that problem? That's basic data. But once you have the startup and now you start seeing patterns, let's say you build an app and users are posting a certain type of content on your app, you're like, oh, people like this type of content. TikTok. People started posting dance videos on TikTok. I don't think the TikTok people were like this should be the main thing of the app. Maybe they were because it was Musical.ly before, so it was like a lot of lip syncing. But let's do another example. Let's say TikTok, people were posting a lot of ASMR videos on TikTok, right? ASMR used to only be a thing like on YouTube. It wasn't on TikTok. But all the ASMR content creator communities just started posting TikToks. If you don't know what ASMR is, it's like doing weird noises or like nice noises, like talking into the microphone like this. And people like listening to that stuff because it's like calming and stuff. I'll concede, I've watched some ASMR videos. I like this guy named Zach Choi on YouTube. He eats food in an interesting way, and sometimes I stare at him for an hour or two and watch him eat food. I don't do it as much anymore, but I used to do it. I'm not going to lie. It was kind of addictive and it was interesting. So when that type of content floods the TikTok platform, theoretically, then TikTok is like, oh, this stuff is working. We need to use the data of how people are interacting with this content. How many likes is it getting? How many comments? How many shares are they doing? What is the ratio of the watch time per TikTok that is consumed across different geographies? And then analyzing all those sets of data for TikTok to realize this is a market opportunity we should go after. These are people that are posting content that should be posting content. We need to get more of them because it's working. That's at a small level, right? Now, think of it from a drug discovery company. You have all this data from over 2 decades of cell therapies that you have done from placental-derived stem cells, and now you're trying to understand how can we innovate methods from all this data that ultimately makes sense. When they say the partnership provides the foundation for translating our data into inferences that can guide research and development, that's the value proposition right there. R&D doesn't happen because someone wakes up one day and is like, let me go find a drug. R&D happens when you have enough data to be able to make hypothetical, calculated scenarios in which if you were to do a particular type of research or particular type of development, it would yield positive results. It doesn't just happen out of nowhere. That requires some level of analysis of data, right? And that's where I see ultimately this partnership making sense for Palantir and Cellularity. Now, that makes sense. Sounds very good. The problem here is that ultimately it's a biotechnology company. And I've had experiences with biotechnology companies before. I'm currently invested in a biotechnology company. And, there was a day, June 2020 or July 2020, I wake up and there's a reverse split. And a reverse split, if you don't know, is when you have, it's a bad thing for the company, right? They take the amount of shares and they divide it by a certain number. So I had, I think, 18,000 shares in the company. It was a 10-to-1 reverse split. It became 1,800 in seconds. When you do this, the stock tends to sell off because the reverse split is bad. It's not good. A regular split is good. When one share becomes 5. A reverse split is the company doing things that needs to retain its value. This company was a penny stock. It was under $1. They needed to get over $1. So they were trading at $4. 40 cents. They did a reverse split, so that 40 cents became $4 because if 400 million shares became 40 million shares, so obviously the value of the stock now goes up times 10, but you had to get rid of all those shares in order for the value of the stock to actually go up by 10, which means now you have a stock that's above $1, which is the necessary requirement to even be listed on the NASDAQ, but the value of the shares has so fundamentally decreased because investors sold off because they were annoyed that you did a reverse split or they didn't want to stay in the long haul. This is common in biotechnology companies, right? You wouldn't see this happening in super major tech companies and stuff like that, but biotech companies in particular do this type of stuff. Now, you will know you are a true investor one day, and there's a lot of ways to know if you're a true investor, but you will really start to understand the psychology of stocks if a company does a reverse split and you justify in your head that they're doing it for a good reason, and you believe in it so much that you're going to stay in that company for the next 2-3 years and justify that it wasn't a 2-month investment, it's a 20-year hold. And what I mean by that is like when a company screws you, but you know that they're screwing you for the right reasons, that's when you start to understand what long-term investing means. Because that biotech company, that screwed me, right? Lost a lot of money that day, lost like $6,000-7,000. Lost, air quotes, because it's not losing until you sell. I've not sold yet, so I am paper losses. It will come back one day. I understand why they did it, right? And a lot of data on their drugs have been released over the past couple months that have been phenomenal. So now the stock price hasn't been affected by that, but that's, I think, Wall Street manipulating a little bit. But I'm very bullish on the stock, right? This is what happens in biotech companies. The only issue I have with this investment is that they put a lot of money into Cellularity. There's a good chance Cellularity doesn't work. Now, I think the chance is mitigated because they have so much data that they're analyzing that the percentage and possibility of it working is more likely because they have data to make calculated decisions about what they're doing and how they're going to do R&D. And obviously, the merits of the company are pretty good. I think that's why Palantir ultimately invested into them. But at the end of the day, if the drugs fail, the drugs fail, right? That's just like the bottom line you have to understand about drug discovery companies. Like the company that I'm in, if the next couple results that come out that are pretty good, it can go 100, 200, 300% in a day, and it would have been well worth the wait. But if it doesn't, and it just completely crashes, then it's done, right? So you really have to analyze what is the projected value and probability of the drugs that the company is innovating in and discovering, and the methods by which they're attacking certain problems. In this case, placental-based cellular therapies is the sort of the key value coming from this company, meaningful enough for it to actually work, right? For the FDA to say that it works, for the regulations to be cool with it, and then for the actual results to come out to say it works. You can't BS results. Like you can BS some numbers. You can say your earnings per share is this, you missed on revenue, but you grew different user metrics here. But like, if the drug fails, the drug fails, right? It's really no joke in this point. So that's the only hesitation I have here, that my experience with biotech companies has led me to believe that any biotech company, unless you do a vast amount of research in them, and I'm assuming Palantir did do a vast amount of research in them for them to actually make the investment, has a high probability of failing, because biotech companies fail. They raise a lot of money off the potential of it. If it works, the investors get filthy rich. But the whole game of investing, especially when the company's private and not public, is like, what's the science? What's the data? And even when you have like $350 million is no joke, right? But it could still fail. So like $350 million assures a public investor, a retail investor, that like, oh, they raised that much money because the data and the drugs were so good, and you can't lie about that stuff, because if you do, you end up like Theranos, right? And a lot of bad stuff happens there. But so these investors put all this money when it was private because all the data was good. So I, as a retail investor, shouldn't be nervous. But the problem is they put it in the beginning life cycles, and a lot of progress may have happened, but at the end of the day, things could still potentially fail. And those investors made a professional risk, right, with their money. And they might have even sold when it went public. So, these are really interesting things to think about. Ultimately, long-term, if this works out, it is another case study for data analysis and the particular optimization mechanisms of Palantir that is working with data companies to be used worldwide in other drug discovery companies, right? Not only will the value of Cellularity go up, the value of Palantir will go up if Cellularity actually turns out to be super effective in these drug discovery, the drugs that they have discovered, and get it off the shelf to the entire world, right? Actually produce hundreds of thousands of doses at scale and make it cost effective. It's going to be really good for Palantir because they own a part of it, and it's going to be a really good case study because now other companies are going to be like, well, we want to discover drugs faster, cheaper, more efficient, more optimized. We want to take all the insights of the data that we have and actually be able to understand how to better discover and do research. We're going to use the company that's succeeding with all these other companies for drug discovery. And if that works, that ultimately gives Palantir, another market opportunity to really go after. So those are my thoughts on Cellularity. Cellularity kind of sounds like Singularity, and Singularity is associated with like the simulation where the AI becomes one with the human. I think Elon Musk talks about this a lot. So like the singularity point, it's a really big, heavy point that's talked about a lot in scientific communities, especially if you're into the simulation thesis and stuff like that. So when I heard of Cellularity, I kind of thought of like Singularity, and I'm wondering if that's the Cellularity is influenced by the name Singularity, where like something comes together and it becomes this like effective thing. It becomes one. I don't know. That's like a random thought I had. But anyway, those are my thoughts on biotech companies. Those are my thoughts on Cellularity's partnership with Palantir. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments. Let me also know, and I read all the comments. I respond to all the comments. So I actually am curious to know about this. Have you invested in a biotech stock before, and how has it gone? I am very, very interested to know your experiences. Are you still in those biotech companies? Do you just stay away from the sector? I got into it randomly, and now I can't get out, but that's okay because it really taught me a lot. And I'm not saying that to justify it to myself. I actually am saying it really did teach me a lot, and I think it influenced me to ultimately become a better investor and do my proper due diligence in the future. I just think I got lucky because the one I did invested ended up having so much due diligence that I never did, but that actually did existed to make me feel confident that it's okay if they did a reverse split, because I think things will be okay in the future. So let me know your comments. My name is Mitt. This is the Daily Business Show. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.